never been offered another position within the district. Jay was not only offered another position, but we created a job for him so that he could stay within the district.
Okay.
And we allowed him that opportunity. We also offered him the head coaching job. He said no. He didn't want to be the head coach. And so that's where that is.
And so you guys were, when he said no, you guys were forced to select a new head coach. And how does that work when you select a new head coach?
So we were forced to select a new head coach with only about a month until the new football game started, the new schedule. So it was very hard for that coach to be able to get that camaraderie with those boys.
Right.
And Rosie had been there for a long time as an assistant coach.
Okay.
And so he
knew
the boys.
Right.
And so the process of finding and selecting a new coach wasn't super extensive.
So it was a hire within type thing.
It was.
Okay.
Because we wanted that consistency.
Right.
Because if we bring in a new coach with a month, there's not going to be consistency, and I feel like that would have been more detrimental to the boys.
Okay. Now, moving on. One thing, folks, I know I talk about it a lot is transparency. I looked at the website of the Huber Heights City Schools. They still have Miss Gannell up on there. That thing could be updated, but you have transparent the city versus I got to figure out how to frame this, but the city versus the school districts. The city, even though I bust their chops a lot about transparency and I want things more open, I think they do, and I don't mean any offense by this, but I think they do a little bit better on transparency than the city schools. Why do you think I would have that perception?
So I think that perception comes from more interaction.
Okay.
And I know that the schools have done a great job recently of embracing more technology. They started a Facebook account last year, but they didn't really do much with it.
Right.
This year they started a Facebook account, and I see posts on there at least once a week.
I see them. Yeah.
And the school has also started an Instagram account.
Okay.
And they're looking at maybe Snapchat and some of the other newer social medias to reach out to people. As well, we've got a new text warning system, and that text warning system has been exponentially better than we had in the past. If there's ever a lockdown, parents get a text immediately.
Okay.
And, I get a text, and then 5 minutes later, it's a text to the whole district.
Okay.
Which has been very comforting, because it's nice to know that we can tell our district what's going on. Right. So the transparency issue, while it may seem that it hasn't happened, it's starting to get better.
Okay. So another hard question would be, and I'll let the transparency thing work out. The city of Huber Heights just received the state report card maybe a month back or so. The overall rating was a D. Do you feel that's acceptable? And then I have a follow-up to that, and then that'll be, So we got a D in Huber Heights. What do you think about that?
We got a D in Huber Heights.
Right.
It's a piece of paper that's actually has no real merit, because you're testing everybody on the exact same way they learned. You're testing everybody on the exact same, okay, you have to do this.
Okay.
And it doesn't take into account socioeconomic issues. We've got kids that never see their parents at home.
Okay.
And so when you don't see a parent because they're working, that makes it difficult for you to go home and do your homework.
Right.
We've got kids that don't get dinner at night.
In Huber Heights.
In Huber Heights. And I know lots of people get hangry.
Right. Right.
And I want to make sure that those kids have what they need. And they come to school, and a lot of times that's the only love they get. So if those kids can come to school and feel loved and appreciated, I'm not really worried about what the report card says. I want those kids to understand that they can be safe there. I want those kids to understand that when they go to school, it can be somewhere that they can hang out with their friends. They can have a positive adult role model in their life. Once we get those areas accomplished, then we can work on learning. We can never have our needs met if our temporal needs aren't first met. And
Maslow's hierarchy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think a part of that also, when you look at the scores that are coming back, all of our elementary, this goes back to your question about early elementary ed, those scores are ever increasing. And year over year, our scores have been increasing. Another thing about the state-funded testing, or the state report card, you take your top performers. Let's say you have a 7th grader that's taking advanced math.
Okay.
Well, that 7th grader is now tested in with the 8th graders, because that 7th grader is technically in an 8th grade class. And so they're tested with the 8th graders, so they're obviously not going to have the same knowledge as an 8th grader.
Okay.
But because of that, now your top learners are no longer tested with your original class. So you have your I use 7th grade as an example. So you have your 7th grade class that the top 10% doesn't test with that score. And our scores are still within 5 to 10 points of where the state wants us to be. In many of the categories, our scores are actually higher than the state asks. And our math has drastically improved this year.
Good.
Our reading improved drastically for the last 2 years. We're making progress, and you know, these state tests came out, or these state report cards came out with no real weight behind them. There's, you know, they're testing how well a fish can climb a tree, basically.
Okay. Now, in an ideal world where there's has to be some way of judging if kids are receiving the information that is taught. So there has to be, in public school, there has to be a way to understand, okay, Johnny and Sally are receiving the education. How do we look at that? Say, because the state testing is controversial with a lot of folks. So how do we understand how kids are learning better?
So that's a good question.
And making progress at that.
Right. So I think, you know, testing is a necessary evil. We have to test in some way.
Right.
But there's no reason we can't take somebody out into the hallway and say, read this paragraph for me. And then the student reads the best they can, and at that point we can kind of test that way. I don't think testing, I think we rely far too heavily on technology to do our testing.
Okay.
The kids are doing math test on a laptop. And oftentimes they don't have a way to show their work. When you and I were in high school,
right,
we showed our work, and the teacher said, okay, I can see what you did there. I can see how you tried to get that answer. So I'm going to give you partial credit. With a computer, there's none of that. It's, oh, you got the answer wrong.
Right.
And
yeah, you used to have to attach like a loose leaf paper to the
Right.
Scantron and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So testing is needed, but what the state's doing probably isn't working out for us.
Correct.
Okay. So why are you running for re-election?
So I'm running for re-election because I know that Huber can be one of the top districts. I know Huber is a top district. Huber is a destination district for a lot of people, and not just for our athletic program. But we've got a lot of good curriculum that smaller schools like Bethel don't have.
Right.
And we've got one of the top CCP programs.
What
in the state.
CCP is?
CCP is College Credit Plus.
Okay.
We knew it as PSEO, basically,
Okay.
post-secondary educational option. And basically what that is, it allows students to go to college once they've met their criteria for their regular credits for 7th through 12th grade.
Okay.
And they can start as young as 7th grade to go to college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they can. Many of these students can technically graduate with a bachelor's degree when they graduate high school.
Wow.
Uh,
Has anybody done that within the Huber Heights district?
I think we've had 1 or 2 students that have done that.
Wow, that is amazing.
And, a part of that program, Wayne has the ability to offer a lot of those classes in-house. So students don't need to leave the campus of Wayne High School to go get their English and their math and their science.
The core. And that saves them money from not having to go out and get a school.
Right. And so that,
loan
because that CCP, that College Credit Plus, is completely paid for. The student incurs no debt from that, and the student's family incurs no debt from that.
So is there a partnership with another college? Or?
So we partner with Sinclair,
Okay.
but the students are allowed to go to any school in Ohio. So if they wanted to do an online school for somewhere in Cleveland, they could do that.
And that's funded through the Huber Heights City Schools?
Correct.
Okay. That's pretty awesome. Do you see any of the candidates you're running against? Or before I go there, is there anything else you want to touch on why you're running? I know we got it on the college credit thing, but
I love Huber Heights.
Mhm.
I love Wayne. I love all the schools here in Huber, and I know that the kids need support, and I, as a dad, I know that it's hard to get that support sometimes from various places, and I want to try to offer that support. I want to serve the community. I've been raised on services is the number one thing, and service is doing something, not expecting something in return.
right.
Doing service true service is when you do something for somebody that you know can never repay you. And if I
agree with that.
If I can help even one child, then I'm going to continue to do it.
Okay.
And if I can help more, great. But if I only help one child to graduate high school, I'm going to push through and try to help that child.
So, when you first ran, what made like your first term? So you're finishing up your first term. So what is that? Why you got into it? Was just service and
so service? Yeah. I think it's important that everybody get back to their community,
right,
and get back to what they have. And so, the first term, I looked at things and a little bit differently, in that, okay, what can I do to change the school system?
Mm-hmm.
And I've realized that because of that, what the state does to us, the state legislature basically tells us what we can and can't do. I've realized that I need to support the children, support the staff in the best way that I can, to make